into the Christmas season, and today is December 3rd. It's time. Christmas is coming, and I don't know how that makes you feel, whether it's like a whoopee or whether it's like, oh, it's coming. I don't know. But I know that it is on its way because when I drove over from Prescott today and I drove through Jerome, there were the flamingos with their Christmas outfits. They all had their Christmas outfits on, so I was happy to see that. Well, Christmas has become, and this whole Christmas season has become a huge cultural event here in our part of the world. It's a time of special lighting and music and gift giving and shopping and family. And it's supposed to be a time when we're all joyful, joyful, joyful. And that's all well and good, but it can also be a time of, frankly, unmet expectations and less than joyful experiences. And I think it's important for us to recognize that. So, what I'd like to do today is talk about how Christmas can be more meaningful this year for you and for me. First, let's talk about avoiding some of the pitfalls. The too muchisms, I think, is the one way we might think about it. And it has to do with expecting too much, spending too much, eating too much, and drinking too much. These are all things that it's really easy for us to fall into in the kind of hurly-burly of the season. But I think it's really important for us to be reminding ourselves that this is a spiritual occasion. And if we can remind ourselves of that, then I think it can help us move through this season much more meaningfully and successfully. So even though it tends to pull up a lot of memories and expectations and seeming obligations that might seem a little heavy at times, I think it's important for us to plan ahead. And this is really by lighting a candle and remembering that this is a time of preparation. It's a good idea, I think, for us to maybe schedule something over the coming month, schedule some quiet time for some prayer, and do our best to stick to it. Maybe some quiet time for meditation. This is such a beautiful time of year often in this part of the world. December can be just kind of clear and bracing and a great time to be outdoors and go for a walk or go for a hike. And I think that's something that can help us keep our an even keel by being out and spending some time out in nature. How about the idea of keeping our gift giving modest? Sometimes we get into a thing of spending more money, and I think we're trying to compensate for something. But whatever the case may be, you know, the old story is that it's really it's the thought that counts, which is kind of trite, but it's true nonetheless. And I think it's important for us to remember that we don't have to go into debt over the course of this month in order to really share something with somebody that is meaningful. And also, I think that finding some way to help out somebody who could use a helping hand is a great way for us to put ourselves in the spirit of the season. And I would like to talk to you about taking a different look at Christmas and the meaning of it, one that really has changed the experience for me considerably. I used to feel, well, let's say less than excited about Christmas, maybe a little leaning towards the Grinch and the humbug side of things, because it seemed to me it was about something that took place a very long time ago. Did it really happen the way it's in that Bible story? I mean, it's really kind of hard to imagine. And the commercialization of it has become just over the top with all of from the sales at the liquor store to the inflatable Santas and the inflatable snowmen on every corner. It seems like it's gotten a little over the top. But early in my involvement with Unity, I heard a minister explain something they called the metaphysical meaning of Christmas. And it's, to a significant degree, this is kind of a unity thing, but it was a powerful thing for me in shifting my perspective about Christmas and what it was all about. it was not just about something that took place 2,000 years ago. It was about something that was happening in me. It was about something that was happening to me here and now. So metaphysics is something a unity study, and metaphysical means beyond the physical. And unity has always had a focus on the metaphysical, on the spiritual symbolism especially to the Bible. Charles Fillmore produced something called the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary. And if you've ever tried to read it, you have my sympathies. It's pretty much impenetrable, but it does have some interesting things in it. And there were other books that were written by Unity authors about this metaphysical perspective that have been meaningful for me. And if we could talk about it sometime, if you would like a suggestion about that. But they're all about the metaphysical or symbolic interpretation of the Bible and the stories that are in the Bible. It's the idea that much of these stories in the Bible, many of them, symbolize a mystical truth that is taking place within us. It symbolizes something that we are experiencing on the road of spiritual growth and development. And the Christmas story is an exceptional example of this. So, in the light of this metaphysical interpretation, we can see it as the story of the birth, not only of the Christ child, but of the Christ awareness in each and every one of us. And we can celebrate it in that spirit. So in the time that we have available here this morning, we're going to talk about how the Christmas story is your story. It's the story of the birth of the Christ awareness in you. It's about the growing awareness that you are a spiritual being. And I'm confident that everyone in this room can relate to this on some level. Everyone in this room is undergoing this spiritual development process that is reflected in this story, looking at it on a deeper level. So I'm going to ask Bob if he would to hand out it. As always, I'd bring you a little piece of paper that you can throw out when you get home. But you might want to stick it on your refrigerator. I don't know. But in fact, I need one of those. Thank you. So I'll give Bob just a moment, but it goes like this. The baby Jesus represents the infant spiritual awareness in you and me. Now, the Christ spirit is something that has always been within you. It's not, from the beginning, before the beginning of time. It is the very essence of your being, that Christhood within you. So what we're talking about here in this birth story is really the birth of the awareness that Christ is within you. And so the baby's birth symbolizes the birth of that realization in you. Somewhere deep in you, there is a recognition that there is that spiritual core of your being, that spiritual presence that is within you. I was just thinking about when you were doing the music this morning that one way I think it could be helpful for us to kind of gain an awareness of this is when you're singing those Christmas songs, and yeah, it's a little early, it's still nice to hear those songs. But when you hear those songs, if you basically think in terms of the idea that when we were singing about the Christ child and the birth of the Christ child, if you can kind of transpose that into the idea that you're singing about the birth of something within you and actually within the people around you as well. But we're talking about celebrating that birth. I think it might lend a little different feeling to some of those songs. So the baby Jesus has two earthly parents, Mary and Joseph. And they also symbolize something in you. Now, all of us, whether we're man or woman, boy or girl, we all have a masculine and a feminine aspect to each one of us. And in the symbolism of this story, Mary symbolizes a subtle feeling nature within us. She is willing, she is receptive, and we have that within us. Joseph symbolizes a more masculine, more thinking or intellectual side of us. We all have that within us as well. Now, so in Mary's case, it is a very pure feeling nature, something akin to intuition that is a part of us. And the baby is born of Mary, really, and God. Joseph doesn't have anything to do with the conception of the child. In fact, if you remember the story, and I'm kind of assuming that somewhere in the back of your mind, you have this story kind of fixed. But you may remember that Joseph, when he realizes that Mary's pregnant, and it isn't his child, it says that he just wants to kind of put the whole thing aside. He wants to quietly put her and the baby aside and just move on with life. He doesn't want to make a big deal out of it. But then he has a dream, and in the dream, he is told by an angel that he has an important role to play in the development and the support of this child. Well, like that, the birth of in this awareness in you and I is a feeling thing. It's something that we feel. It is not an intellectual thing. As much as we might study about spirituality and engage our intellect, the awareness is a feeling thing. Now, our thinking nature can support this spiritual development, but the awareness is born of the feeling of the heart. And I have found that engaging that more intellectual part of us, of me, is helpful in supporting the growth and development of that spiritual consciousness. We can study about spirituality. We can engage our thinking process in terms of understanding it better and support that tender, vulnerable, spiritual infant awareness that is within us. So, what about Herod? Well, every good story has a villain in it, and in this story, it's Herod. And the fact of the matter is, you and I have a Herod in us as well. He symbolizes the ego, the unillumined ego. Now, Herod, in his kingdom, he is in charge. That's all right. He is in charge of the society, and he hears that this baby who's going to be born is a future king, and so he's threatened by this, and he decides that he has to destroy the child, and that's part of the story. And we're told that in one, the stories are a little different in the four Gospels, but in one of these, we find out that Joseph hears of the threat that Herod constitutes, and he takes the family through Egypt on their way back to Nazareth to protect the child. So I think what it is useful for us to recognize is that the ego in us would quash this spiritual child because it kind of threatens the position of the ego. The ego, I thought Emerson did a great job of describing the ego in us by calling it a bloated nothingness. But the ego tends to be about self-inflating, about being in control, and it can often deflect us from the spiritual truth of who we are because the ego, frankly, wants to stay in control. And so Jesus' family had to deal with difficulty, and Herod was certainly not helpful in this. And so our own ego, we realize, will get in the way on our spiritual journey. So what other elements could we incorporate here? Well, we might look at the fact that there is a star in the east and the three magi who follow it. Now, the east, in many spiritual traditions, the east is the direction of spirituality and people facing east towards the rising sun. That's a strong tradition. And so this star rises in the east, and the Magi follow this star to find the newborn king. So the east is, as I said, now we can imagine a star rising in the east. It's probably arising before dawn, before the light shines. It's a glimmer in the sky. And now, from a practical point of view, it's a little difficult imagining anybody following a star in the sky to get to a place called like Bethlehem. But in the symbolic story that we have, that star represents a glimmer of the truth, this little point of light that is revealing the way for us to follow. And so the Magi head in the direction of this glimmer of truth. And in the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary, it says that the three Magi represent the stored up resources of the soul. The stored up resources of the soul. And they who are moving in the direction of that little glimmer of the truth. They bring their gifts not to the ego, but to the new spiritual awareness that is emerging. They represent inner realms of consciousness, knowledge, and capacities that may have been realized in a previous incarnation, if you accept that framework of things. Or you might think that maybe that these are previous spiritual capacities that come from maybe the collective consciousness. But in any case, the gold, frankincense, and myrrh represent the riches of spirit, the beauty of spirit, and the eternity of spirit. So what this means to me is that as the awareness of spirit gains ascendancy in our own consciousness, that there are soul qualities, maybe talents, resources that are coming to the fore, that are coming into our awareness. To me, it's another reason why it's important for us to not just limit ourselves based on our past and our past performance and what we think of as our past capabilities, because as this spiritual awareness begins to emerge in us, what the story is telling us is that there are spiritual and soul resources that are coming to bear in our lives. We may be capable of all kinds of things from these resources that we wouldn't have dreamed we were capable of doing. But here they are coming to celebrate the birth of this awareness within us. Well, how about the manger? Christ child isn't born in a palace or even in a hospital, but a humble manger. And it seems to me that the symbolism of this is not all that difficult to get in touch with. What is a manger? It's a shelter for animals to sleep in. It's a quiet, simple place. I think on the one hand, we might say that we might think that our own consciousness is a little too humble for that holy Christ presence to be born within us. But here it's saying in this story that it was in a manger, in a shelter for animals that the Christ child was born. And so even if our thoughts are on the more humble side, nonetheless, this is the place where this dawning, this birth could take place within us. So I think another way we can look at that is that this is a place in consciousness that is simple and peaceful. That's the kind of environment in our own consciousness that fosters this birth, not a consciousness that's all out there engaged in the activity of the world, but a consciousness that is willing to go into that quiet and simple place. Well, so how does all this add up for us? What can it mean for us this year? Well, I don't know about you, but even in the best of years, I have my skeptical and difficult moments with the whole Christmas scene, the whole production that Christmas is these days. But I think this kind of awareness, this kind of perspective can help us to get quiet, take a different kind of look at what's going on in Christmas and what's going on within us, and make this a different kind of celebration this year. Something remarkable is taking place within you. It may be something that is hard to recognize from time to time, but there is the birth of something incredible within you. And that is that very Christ presence is within you. Yes, Christmas is a celebration of the birth of an individual who came into this life wave with and made a tremendous discovery that he shared with the world, a mess, and gave to us a way to follow. He gave to us a message of truth and light. And yes, I believe while the story in the Bible is heavily mythologized, I do believe that it basically, this truth of the birth of Jesus is a very real story. But it is also this metaphysical approach, it seems to me, is helping us to take a more metaphysical approach to life itself, to realize that deeper than the superficial experiences of every day, everything has a deeper metaphysical level to it. Everything has a spiritual significance to us. Our lives do. So it seems to me that during this Christmas season, when it seems like it's really just turned into something all about the gross national product, we can look deeper and realize that we're celebrating the birth of a new consciousness within us and those around us, because this Christ spirit is within everyone. And as we realize it more fully, it can liberate us from fear and want and bless us in so many ways. It is a miracle. It is a miracle, and it is the good news. Christ in you, your hope of glory. That's the way Paul put it. Not just Christ out there, but in here. And I think it can encourage us to take some time over the course of this month that is often so busy, when we feel like there's so many things that we must get done and we must hurry around. It gives us an opportunity to maybe allow for a humble and quiet place where we can get more in touch with that Christ presence. Maybe when we see the elements of the story being reenacted or retold or reproduced in song, we can kind of transpose it into this metaphysical message about what is also going on within us. I believe that the story that has lasted, it's remained compelling for the human race for 2,000 years. And it's because it resonates with something within us, a truth within us. There's something mystical in this story that on some level within our being, we are resonating with it. It is the story of a great good news. And so I'm hoping that this perspective, which frankly has helped me quite a bit over the years to look at Christmas in a different way, that perhaps this can open the door for a different kind of Christmas experience for you this year. So let's take a moment and take this into prayer. I invite you to let's take a breath and release it. And maybe another deep breath and release it. As we are reminded of this truth, that within us, in our hearts, in our awareness, there is something new, regardless of our age, something that is eternally new, ever beautiful. There is within us something that is miraculous. And even while the world may seem to be turning upside down with all the challenges, the conflicts, that this truth is at the very heart of our being. And we are deeply grateful for this truth and the fact that it is dawning within us. Over the years, that path that we're on may have its ups and downs and turns, but we are on a path of spiritual awakening. And so in this season where we celebrate the birth of our way shower, our example, our teacher, we also take the opportunity to celebrate the presence of the teacher within. May we be open and receptive. As Mary was in the story, may we be open and receptive. To the dawning of a new light within us, a new awareness within us. We take a breath and release it. And we give thanks. Thank you, God. Thank you, Spirit. Thank you, beloved Spirit. And so it is. Amen.